There are many good lines in the Bible. I must find out who wrote it. My favourite is, "He who is without sin cast the first stone," which takes me to the leader of the Labour Party and alleged leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, the beer-loving politician who failed to reach many parts of the country outside London last week in the local elections. The Labour Party deserves better. If anything, this pious, simpering lawyer-turned-politician is actually worse than the previous incumbent. Starmer's such an anodyne fence-sitter, he makes the truly dreadful Jeremy Corbyn look like Winston Churchill. It's my view that Sir Keir has never been liked outside London, which of course has now shifted so far to the left, it's twinned with Beijing. And it's the moral thrust, the hand-wringing religiosity of a man who thinks he is the spiritual backbone of this country that has been his undoing. Starmer may indeed pay the price for haranguing Boris Johnson for months on end over Partygate, red wine and lovely cakes like this one, the carrot cake that my team picked up earlier from M&S. How was focusing on this silly Westminster soap opera of Partygate helping millions of struggling Brits choosing between feeding their kids and heating their homes? There is a perception of Keir Starmer as a decent man, and I'm sure he is. Bright, articulate, and he has begun to rid his party of the scourge of anti-Semitism, for which he deserves huge credit. And I think he's got a heart, having famously bought land to accommodate some of his mother's donkeys. Except that ever since he got the top job, he has been a political donkey. I honestly can't think of one thing that he's got right over the years. As the shadow Brexit secretary, he campaigned for a second referendum, proving himself to be wildly out of touch with huge swathes of Labour voters in the Midlands and the north of England. He only knows about voters in the north of London. On Thursday, Labour gained Mayfair and lost Hull. I think that tells you everything you need to know. Welcome to Hull. He campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, which would have been an economic and national security disaster for the country. But at least Jezza stood for something, even if it was wrong. The Thursday local elections were not great for Keir Starmer. Yes, they accrued many council seats. Of course, they did. The Tories did badly. But in the context of Partygate, the Tories having been in power for 12 years, and the staggering cost of living crisis, why didn't Starmer do better? Well, because it's my view the public find him boring, arrogant, pompous, and about as charismatic as a cup of pond water. Well, it's sink or swim for him now, as the Mail on Sunday explode Labour's pack of lies about the Beergate event in Durham, in which they cite evidence it was pre-planned. Labour's ginger growler-in-chief, Angela Rayner, was said not to be there, but was. And Starmer's story that they got back to work after eating curry looks to be a tall one. Starmer is now experiencing some well-deserved chicken karma, and he's made a complete madras of the situation. What a popper dum-dum. And he only has himself to blame. By politicising Partygate to such an extent at the expense of a focus on what you are going through right now, with raging inflation and energy prices, looks to have been his greatest miscalculation. Take a look at this tweet. This was in reference to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Honesty and decency, says Starmer, matter. After months of denials, the Prime Minister is now under criminal investigations for breaking his own lockdown laws. He needs to do the decent thing and resign. That tweet may come back to haunt him. Now, I don't want to cancel anyone, as you well know. But with this holier-than-thou moralising approach, old Starmer has cancelled himself. I know there is a perception that Starmer is this lovely, progressive, caring voice in politics, but the tangible evidence is quite the opposite. Why was he so supportive of lockdown measures that impacted the poorest in our society? Why was he so happy to sign off the extraordinary damage of school closures when it would hurt not just children, but their families? He said at the time, school closures are inevitable. No, they weren't. It was pure politics in which he participated. Just as he politicised Partygate, it's my view that he politicised the pandemic. Every Wednesday in PMQs, he added to the confected hysteria around the virus. Like many in the media, he whipped up anxiety and panic about what was a nasty virus, absolutely, but mild or non-existent for most. A third of people, even with alpha, didn't have symptoms at all. A potentially nasty virus, yes, we all hate it, absolutely. But the bubonic plague, it was not. If I was leader of the opposition, we can but dream, I would have rejected every single COVID measure because it's very clear in my view that they were not just highly damaging, but they didn't make a blind bit of difference. The data's coming in. I think it's unarguable, but time will tell. The other problem with Starmer is that he is irredeemably woke. Starmer took virtue signalling to a new level here. Taking the knee, now most right-minded people abhor the evil of racism, but this was a shallow, empty political gesture. And he was at it again just a couple of months ago when posing with Canada's Justin Trudeau in a mask long after the mandates had been lifted. The lesson for Starmer and for the Labour Party in general is a clear one. Go woke, no vote. Now, I will never let Boris Johnson off the hook. Partygate hypocrisy at number 10 was a disgrace, and he is the person who was in the pocket of the sage scientists on and off for 2 years. Boris is the main signatory to the mess we are in now. But Starmer was his chief accomplice. Tory rebels plus Labour votes could have stopped the COVID damage and prevented the cost of living crisis, which I'm calling the cost of lockdown crisis. But at least Boris has charisma. His party flies the flag rather than sneers at it. And Sir Keir Starmer would have locked us down longer and harder than anyone else. At least Boris's libertarian instincts kicked in for Freedom Day on the 19th of July. Starmer called Freedom Day reckless and sought evidence as to why we shouldn't shut down the whole country over Christmas. And of course, Starmer doesn't know what a woman is. He's confused about who has a cervix, whilst it's clear he is not in possession of a backbone. I have voted Labour on several times in my life. That's right, I have voted Labour many more times than once. And I'd like to vote Labour again. He's got his haters, and by God, he made mistakes. But Tony Blair offered a patriotic and aspirational vision of modern Britain. And since then, the party for whom he delivered 3 landslide victories has disappeared up its own backside and now indulges in divisive, woke, bonkers identity politics. And it's got no idea that anyone exists outside of the rainbow flag bubble of London and the South East. I think Starmer is toast. And after his Beergate hypocrisy, where does he go from here? But he was the wrong choice of leader in the first place, and his likely departure is entirely self-inflicted. There is plenty of available talent for the top job, but this could be the last serious chance that the membership have of getting this right if they want to achieve power. It's time to make the Labour Party great again. And as for Starmer, he'll just have to take his just desserts. Now, let's try this cake. Talk about a soggy bottom.